Hi, welcome to our weekly podcast, The Homemade Family. As you can see, we have somebody special with us today, Kris Langworthy. We're going to introduce her in just a moment. But we have been talking for the last several weeks about emotions.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Emotions. So this is part 4 of our emotion series, and we kind of quit in the middle of where we were going because we are just really excited about Kris Langworthy and what she brings to the table. So, Kris, why don't you tell us a little about who you are?
Woohoo!
Let's start
As
with
I
family. Who you are in the realm of family.
family. Yeah, I was going to say we could go lots of directions with that. Wait a minute.
Right.
I have a pastor friend that wrote a book about become you. Let's start there. No, I'm just kidding.
Right.
So Kris Langworthy, been married to this really handsome bald dude for about 31 years already. My goodness. Married back in 91, so 30 plus years. And we've been blessed with 6 kiddos and 1 in heaven. So 5 girls and 1 boy. So we get to practice all kinds of emotional stuff. To go to your subject, we have joked for a long time that we practice we practice lots of things, but my husband or my son is like the best trained husband material because he's got 5 sisters. So, he's gotten to live with that a little bit. So
Excellent. And what are the age ranges of your kids?
So my youngest, or our youngest, she's not just mine, our youngest is going to be 12 in June, and our oldest will be 28 here shortly. So
12 to 28.
28, 16-year spread. So we've got a whole drama going on.
Right. So Nathaniel and I have been talking about emotions. If you have not had the opportunity, talking about kids and family when they walk
I was
in.
going to say kids, family, and drama. Yeah.
You can probably just go check with them.
For those of you who are not seeing the video, we just had a little guest pop in.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. For those who aren't watching online live, and you're listening on the podcast. So if you have not joined with us up to this point in our emotions talk, you can find those other 3 talks on our website at thehomemadefamily.com or on anywhere podcasts are played. Look for Insight Now and then look for The Homemade Family, search emotions, you'll find it there. While we have been doing talks on emotions, Kris, you have been doing some work on emotions as well. Why don't you tell us what you've been up to lately in these talks and a little about your business?
Okay. So what I've been talking about the last 2 to 3 months has become really a hot topic, is talking about joy, strength, resilience, emotional health, and just people are coming off of just a whole bunch of turmoil, right? And we were talking just before we went on the air about change fatigue and where people are at and just building resilience. But the topic that everybody's really gravitating towards right now is how do we rebuild joy? How do we restore joy? And so that it's been really kind of an interesting piece of emotional health that I've been talking to. So I launched a business back in, I got to think back how many years it's been, 13, 14. And just helping people equip and empower, especially women and families, to be who they are, to, be able to make a positive impact in their world without sacrificing what matters most. And just helping people with that. So, and defining what matters most to you. And for some of us, we need joy. We need to find that joy again. We need to come back to joy. How do we come back to that when it's been kind of tough?
Right. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we've been talking about is emotions, right? And how they're indicators. They're not determiners, they're indicators. So we feel them and they're actually good. They're part of how we're created in God's image, because God is an emotional God. But our choices aren't dictated by emotions. That it can inform choices that we make and actions that we take, but we're not controlled by emotions. Emotions are just indicators, right? So specifically talking about joy, why is joy important enough to get a focus for a whole episode?
For a whole episode. It's, here's the thing about joy is what we have found about joy is it's that one emotion that we all crave that we're all attracted to, that we're actually magnetized towards. If you start paying attention to the people that you admire, or the people that you're like, I want to be with them, like, it's the emotion of joy. And what they're finding is that people with joy, or have this joy strength, are more resilient. They're able to handle the tough stuff. They actually have better immune systems. Like, okay, we say that laughter is like a medicine. Yeah, it kind of is. And laughter is a piece of joy, but it's not the whole of joy. But we're finding, in the fullness, in his presence is the fullness of joy. Like, why would we not want to go after joy? Why would we just feel better? We do better. And people with this actually, we're not just after the money and after all of that, but they're finding people that have this actually earn more and are more successful in every aspect of their life.
Yeah.
So
I think some people maybe would hear some of that and be like, well, I don't just want to go after joy because I want to make sure I stay grounded in reality.
Right.
How would you respond to that?
How would I respond to that? I would say, absolutely. There is reality. Joy is not like ignoring anything else, right? I love to reference, when I do presentations, I talk about the movie Inside Out, and how this little girl named Riley is having all these emotions. We get to see inside her brain, and it's like a little control center. It's kind of a fun way to help picture emotions. But the little character Joy is like trying to run the show. And Joy actually recognizes that she has to allow sadness to have its day and have its moment for joy to return. And that joy is not denying reality. Joy is not just positive thinking. Joy is glad to be with you. I delight in you. I enjoy being with you, even if you're having a tough day. We can have our joy center turned on, our joy switch turned on when you're having a really rough day, but we're emotionally connected and we're in a positive space of knowing that we care about each other. And that's what real joy is, not this whatever, I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, but like this surreal emotion that's like ecstasy. We're not talking, joy is not ecstasy. Joy is that glad to be with you moment.
So you're saying joy is an emotion we can experience even in the middle of bad stuff going on around us.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Why don't you share real quick a little bit of your just a real nugget about how you learned joy and perseverance through a tough season?
So part of our story and part of what launched me into this is in 2006, our oldest daughter was diagnosed with a brain tumor. Like, that's not a fun-filled moment. Thank you very much. That's not what's on everybody's 5-year bucket list of what they want to accomplish in life. Like, hey, let's go after this one. But what we learned in the midst of that is that joy could be totally present in the midst of really tough stuff. And that actually you needed to have the joy. People say, well, I'm going to wait to have joy until the storm is past. You don't wait for the storms past to dance. You learn to dance in the rain, that kind of a thought. And that joy, it was joy that actually held us together. That places and spaces where you call a friend when, we had a reoccurring brain tumor assigned to us as a roommate. That was not my most happy moment, ladies and gentlemen. Mama Bear was not happy about that. But calling a friend and having her present in the moment, and that she didn't shame me for my emotion. I think that's the key, is understanding we can have emotions without shame. I could have anger in that moment. I could have fear in that moment. And yet that joy strength of being able to call a friend and being able to say, okay, let's process this. Let's walk this through. And so joy is what helps you. You need the joy. They've actually found that that's a key piece to you getting back up.
Yeah.
That's really good.
And that's what we learned when she was in treatment. That was, we had to find places, and we would sometimes just watch videos just to laugh, just because sometimes you needed to laugh.
It's good.
It's good. Speaking of that, we were talking beforehand about fear and the difference between left brain and right brain. Now, I would imagine if you got a diagnosis that your child has a brain tumor, there's an incredible amount of fear. But our kids and all of us face fear on a daily basis. Would you talk to us a little bit about the difference between right brain and left brain and how we process things like fear?
For sure. Because, how many times has somebody tried to rationalize you out of fear? Well, it's just thunder, Kris, or it's just a little lightning storm. You shouldn't be afraid. And then the shame comes in, right? And it's like we're trying to rationalize somebody out of their emotion, and all of a sudden they don't feel validated. What they have found, and I'm trained as a nurse as well, so I get a little science geeky, and I kind of love that stuff and digging into like how the brain works, and like there's science behind all of this, and that faith and science can coexist completely. Left brain is totally your logical brain. It's your factual brain. It's your structure down the line. And it cycles at 5 times a second. Okay, that doesn't mean much to you until I tell you this. The right side of your brain is your emotional, your creative, your expressive side, and it cycles at 6 times a second. 5 to 6. Little difference, right. But where that makes a difference is that your emotions come faster than your logic. Yeah. And what happens is sometimes we try to fix a right brain emotional issue with a logical left brain issue, and it doesn't work. And so when you try to logic somebody out of fear, it doesn't work. You're not addressing the emotional side. That's where the issue's at, is on the emotional side. So coming in with the opposite frequency of comfort and love and support, okay, now we can neutralize that a little bit. Now we can go into left brain, but we can't start in left brain.
That's really good. You gave us an acronym, or let's talk about, Nathaniel and I have been saying this, that emotions aren't indicators.
They are indicators.
Or they are indicators. They're not determiners. They're indicators. And you had another analogy for that, but why don't you go ahead and share about that?
So I love that you guys use it as indicators, because what I do when I'm doing presentations is I talk about sometimes, if our life is a vehicle, sometimes our life gets stuck in emotions, right? And we have this thing called AAA, roadside assistance, that can help us get unstuck. Well, I use AAA as an acronym for when people get stuck or they're kind of wrestling with an emotion. And that first thing we have to do is the first A is acknowledge the emotion. Just acknowledge that it's there, that there's no shame in it being there. It's a frequency. It's been tripped by something. We can go into that later, but there's an emotion present. Acknowledge it. That's the first step. Just acknowledge it. And the second A is affirm a desired outcome. Where would you like to have your emotions at? Where would you like to go? And people say, oh, Kris, I can't change my emotions. Yeah, actually you can. You can actually, that's what you guys have been talking about, right? Is there,
right.
And that for me, what I'm really is like, I use the analogy of dashboard lights. You guys use indicators. I say that emotions are your dashboard lights on your car. They're telling you something's going on with that engine. Mine were off last week, and I'm like, hubby, engine lights going off. And he's like, okay, let me get the code. We got to get the code to figure out what's going on. So that's where, get the code, acknowledge it. And then, okay, what do we want? Well, I want my engine to run better. I want my engine to run smoother. Okay, that's my desired outcome. What do I need to do? The third A is that I need to take action or create an action plan to go after the desired emotion. Where do I want to go? Where do I want to be showing up? Mm-hmm. But there's no shame in acknowledging that there's a light going off on my dashboard, right. Hello, there's a reason.
Yeah. That's really great. So let's bring this really practical at home. I think it's funny that you talk about emotions running faster than logic brain, because for us, I can't tell you how many times my husband is saying slow down, your brain needs to be working as fast as your emotions and energy are going, if you can't think faster than you're acting, then you need to slow everything down. And when you said this, I'm like, oh my gosh, that just makes so much sense. But so let's say we have a child that has had a bad dream, and they wake up and they're really feeling fearful. What would you do in that circumstance?
One of the first things I do is, when you get in fear, it's like, you can't see my hands if you're on the podcast, but it's like take and put blinders on a horse, right? You've just become tunnel vision, and only, I don't remember, I think it's 20% of your brain is working at that point or something like that. It shuts down. That fight or flight response shuts you down. You can't think clearly. You literally cannot think clearly at that moment. And so one of the things I do with my kids, or if I have a coaching client who's having some anxiety or something like that, I'm like, okay, put both feet on the ground. And I want you to take a deep breath. And I tell people to breathe in from their toes. I'm like, I know as a nurse that doesn't make sense, but breathe in from your tips of your toes. You didn't know your toes could breathe, did you? Breathe in from your tips of your toes all the way. Bring that breath all the way up to the top of your head and hold it for 2 seconds. And then breathe it all the way back out your toes. And I have them do it 2 to 3 times, because what happens in that moment is you've slowed down that hormonal response that's happening to that emotion. You've slowed down the heart rate, you've slowed down the breathing, and you actually can trick your brain at that point into thinking everything's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're slowing it down. And now we can start like, okay. And what that's done is you've also been present with that person who's feeling fear. You're emotionally there. You're supporting them. That's where I love the whole concept of Emmanuel, God with us, that he doesn't abandon us in our fear. He doesn't walk away from us in our yucky emotions. He is totally present, and he brings his spirit of peace. That's what we're doing. We're bringing it in and slowing it down. And so that if we can do that, hold their hand so you know that I'm present, that just that physical touch, you're reactivating that connection, because really joy is all about connection. And do you see me? Do you hear me? And so, hold their hand if they're open to it. Help them slow breathe. Help them just kind of, okay. Now, when your brain has got that oxygen back into the full capacity, now we can start talking. Now we can start processing again.
Yeah.
It's really good. We've seen that so many times, when somebody comes bursting into your bedroom at night, and all of a sudden it's just, what do? They're panicked. I mean, literally they're in a panic. Annalie from Idaho is loving the quote, "Joy is about connection." We'll have to dig some more into that. We see that over and over. Or somebody hurt me. It's a conflict between 2 parties, and they're just reacting out of pain. You hurt me, you hurt me, you hurt me. And it just keeps going back and forth, because, and it's so much of what I end up doing when I step in between 2 of my kids is I'm like, stop, just
slow
down.
Yeah.
And my whole goal is I'm trying to get them to see the other person, because all they're doing in that emotional swirl is I'm only seeing myself, and I'm only trying to figure out how to protect myself. I have no vision for where I'm trying to go in this conflict. I'm reduced to just trying to be safe, which is comes out as I'm just trying to be right. But really the heart of it is I'm just trying to feel safe. And until you can slow it down and get them reconnected to, I am safe. I'm with family. They love me. And actually, I want this connection. So I need to stop attacking the person I want to be connected to, because it's hurting the connection.
Well, and you're going right to a piece of another subject we haven't kind of gone here, but I might tiptoe this direction. Emotions are contagious. And so you've got somebody that's angry and hurt. If you're not self-aware, like, okay, or not aware of what's going on, that emotion is contagious, you got somebody who's hurt, you got a sibling who's hurt, and all of a sudden this one's hurt. And now we got that ping pong going back and forth so fast, and it's just escalating because my anger just amped up your anger, which just amped up, and we just went back and forth on it.
And how easy is it as a parent to walk into that and immediately you're hitting the roof?
Well, and that's where we as parents have to know, right? Because we just walked into a frequency. Is it something we want to get infected with? And that maybe is my nursing language, but it's like, I don't want, for me, it was such an aha to recognize I could walk into a room and feel that vibration. I could feel that frequency, feel that emotion. That's not mine.
Yeah.
It's not my circus. It's not my monkey. Now, what do I want to do? Do I want to be a thermometer or do I want to be a thermostat? How do I want to show up?
Right.
And
You've talked about frequency a number of times. And would you explain that, like the science of it, so people aren't thinking, oh, this is like hippie mumbo jumbo
new ager
vibrations, because you explained that to us ahead of time.
Good vibration.
So literally they have been able to measure, like in hertz or whatever, they actually can measure the frequency of an emotion. And so what I liken it to is like there are frequencies for radio stations going through this room all the time. They're going through your room all the time. Do you pick them up? Well, you have a right transmitter or radio thing, you could pick them up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes there are different people that are more sensitive to picking up stuff, or we could have a word of knowledge or a word of discernment, that we pick up what's in the room, but they are actually able to measure the frequency, like vibrational frequency. This isn't new age. This is like concrete stuff. They have actually measured, and joy is a higher frequency than depression.
Yeah.
It's like literally a frequency.
Yeah, you can see this, like if you've ever been to a live basketball game in the last 5 minutes when it's so close and your team's going to win, and the energy that comes up, that joy, that excitement. At the same time, we went to a concert and the singer was telling about his son that had died, and you could feel the depression come in and how he had to swing that back around. And so you can collectively be pulled into those frequencies, and sometimes it's even something that happened before you entered and they've already gone, but it's still resonating in the atmosphere. Yes, so you feel that when you come into it. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think for our kids to help train them in this, so that when they walk into an atmosphere, does this feel dark? I mean, you guys talked about it on another podcast about walking into different stores in a mall and helping them train to recognize it. But I think as parents, like we had a situation before we even got on this call today where I had to explain to one of my children, like, okay, I want you to know that mom is kind of frustrated with this situation over here, and I might be putting off a tone of anger or frustration. This is not towards you. This is me regulating it and processing it and getting it back where I want it, but don't interpret it as yours or that mom is mad at you. I'll never forget one night walking into one of my kids' rooms, and this child had the discernment to say, okay, are you upset with me? Because your face looked really upset, all the stuff was going off. And I'm like, oh no, thank you for calling that out, because no, I'm still like, my face hasn't caught up to my new emotion yet. It's like, I'm still there. But for our kids to understand that they don't have to carry that, just as much as we don't want to pick up their junk. When our kids have a cold and they have a snotty nose, we're washing our hands because we don't want to catch their cold,
Right.
And then, we do our due diligence to wash our hands, but tell our kids, like, hey, you might want to wash your hands, emotionally.
Yeah. I think that is such a good word that you said there, of just being self-aware of where our emotions are at and how that can affect atmospheres, and then communicating to make sure that there's not miscommunication and misunderstanding between us and our kids. Because I mean, some kids maybe are different than this, but I mean, I remember being a kid, and if well, scripture talks about it this way, like there's even the blessing that God commanded the priests to declare over the people of Israel, that the Lord's face shines upon you. And that's literally the picture of what we're talking about, that our countenance is radiating that joy frequency versus our countenance is radiating frustration or disappointment or whatever the negative emotion is. And we actually bring that into an atmosphere. I remember when our kids came home from the hospital, even as babies, we felt the atmosphere shift in our home. Or when even more so as they grew and they'd go spend a night at grandma's, the atmosphere in our home changed because that person wasn't contributing. Now, Nehemiah, when he went to go have a sleepover at grandma's, it was like taking 3 kids out of our home because he puts off such loud frequencies in his very big personality. But just having that awareness. But again, the second step of that in communicating so that our kids aren't receiving that from us and then taking it as a burden on themselves, because I think that's kind of in most kids' nature to do if they've got a healthy connection with their parents.
Well, and especially, you know, I work with people with personality profiles, helping them understand how they're wired and whatnot. And different people are energized by bringing harmony to a situation. And if they don't understand that it's not in their space, like they're not really responsible for that. Like God started speaking to me years ago about false responsibility, where I felt like I had to bring like fix stuff. And it was like, and then I was accused of meddling, you know, and then it was like, then the whole confusion thing goes on. But when you understand like how that person's wired, or that they might have more of a tendency to not like that conflict. Some people thrive on just being like functional. I don't care what's going on. I can function in it. And it doesn't matter. Other people, it's like, no, it's got to be peaceful. It's got to be, you know, we had a little bit of a discussion here the other night, and all of a sudden one of my kids was cleaning up the kitchen and putting everything in order. And I'm like, whoa, 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 you don't need to fix mom's stuff. You know, this is mom's little drama, you know, and just owning it. But I think that's part of modeling healthy emotions to our kids, to, number one, take knowledge. You know, parents have problems. Sometimes things happen at work, or things happen, you know, my husband had a situation at work that he's like, I had to work through it. And they walked in while we were talking about it, and they wanted to snuggle and cuddle. And it's like, this isn't the time or the space, because daddy needs to talk about his stuff. Yeah. And we need to process this, and to help them understand that, and understand, because that's real world stuff. They're going to be in a workplace. They're going to be in a relationship. And I even think about, you know, like you could take it to any context, a pastor, a worship leader, or whatever stuff is in you is being imparted to that group. And so, you know, be aware, you know?
Yeah, that's good.
Be aware.
So we're getting close to our end time. Do you have just some quick tips for people on how to increase their joy levels?
Mm-hmm. So one thing that is kind of fun to do for joy, you know, we talked a little bit ago about left brain versus right brain, gratitude versus appreciation. This was pointed out to me. This is really powerful. Like, one thing you can do to up your joy strength is not just do the task of being thankful. Like, I'm thankful for Nathaniel and Amy. I'm thankful for my husband. And it becomes very rote and there's no emotion attached to it, right? Yeah. But if I actually take the time, I call it sip and savor. If you actually take the time to sip and savor, like, oh, I really appreciate Nathaniel and Amy. I love their heart for family. I love the way they go after that. I love how they draw people in. And I sit and I soak and I marinate in the thing that I appreciate about somebody. Can you just feel it shift?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just like, yeah, I want to be connected to that. And so that is one that I've really been trying to be more intentional about and telling people about. Like, take the time to appreciate. It's easy for us to find the things that frustrate us about each other. Mm-hmm. Take the time to appreciate. I'm sure nobody else has this issue. Maybe it's just my side. But, you know, if we learned anything during lockdown, right, is like all the fault lines got exposed, right? All the fault
right.
I love you, but I don't always like you.
Yeah.
Learning to slow down and savor that person in front of you, savoring the sunset in front of you, savoring that you have that moment. That is a huge joy strength thing. And taking the time to truly connect with the people you love. Like, actually, I tell people all the time, I may not be a doctor, I'm a nurse, but I still can give some nursing orders. And one of my nursing orders is like, you need to go sit and have coffee with a friend who's your biggest cheerleader. And you get to be their cheerleader, because that actually builds you inside. Like, hey, yeah. So here's your prescription for coffee with a girlfriend, you know, or a guy friend, whichever way you want to put it, you know. Yeah. It's like, no, it's actually, and we kind of said it right before we were done, meaningless, air quotes, conversations are actually really meaningful, are actually really good for us. They really actually can build us. So those are my two big right now. And rest. Just take time to breathe and rest.
Yeah. And sometimes that can just be, I'm going to take 30 seconds before I walk into my next meeting, and I'm going to do some breathing, just some deep breathing from my toes. It can be in the little pieces like that. It doesn't mean like, well, now I need to adjust my entire life to really make sure I'm getting 8 hours of sleep every night. It's like, no, it can be the little, okay.
I actually do that between coaching clients. I'll actually stand at my computer here and I'll actually like close my eyes and breathe in from my toes and bring it up. And it's almost like kind of like releasing so that I can be fully present for that person who's going to be in front of me that next call.
So good. So good.
And it's micro rest.
Yeah. This has been amazing. And I really hope that more people hop on the comment section as they're listening to this later on or watching this video later on, and get some conversation going of applying some of these things to your own life. And again, letting us know what questions you have from that, because the more you interact with us in these podcasts, the more that we know how to serve you better and how to answer the questions that you're actually asking and the things that you're facing. Otherwise, we're just going to talk about ourselves and assume that you like it. So, but this has been so good. Thank you, Kris, for joining us. Amy's got some information on how you can get more of the good stuff that Kris has been sharing today.
Yeah, I feel like that went so fast, and there's things that I would love to dig deeper in. Just again, real quick, the AAA, acknowledge the emotion of affirming and activating, which I know you call desired outcome, and all of that. But and then just slowing things down. But if people want to connect with you, either to have more resources or some of the things that you offer, if they'd like you to come and speak on joy, where can people find you, Kris?
So you can go two places. You can go to my website and sign up. At the bottom of the page, there is a place where you can sign up for either, it says complimentary coaching session, but you'll have an opportunity to say, hey, I want to talk to you about this, or I want to talk to you about that. Let's just get together and chat. So if you go to www.impactzonestrategies.com, you can scroll to the bottom. I think actually there might even be a tab at the top. I forget. I haven't been on the page for a while, but just go ahead and fill out a form so that we can connect. I love doing one-on-ones. Obviously, I talk about joy, strength, and connecting with people. That's my favorite thing to do. Or else you can email me at Kris, Kris, at impactzonestrategies.com and give me a shout there. So I would love to connect with people there. I'm not real good at social media because I much rather do the one-on-one, face-to-face type stuff. So I'm not always there. My coach has been building my joy strength about going after and being more present on social media. So just enjoy connecting with people. So I'd love to do it there.
It's good.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. We're just so excited to have you on, and I'm sure that we'll have you again because I love your medical nursing background and how you tie that so well into the everyday stuff that we deal with, and then all the wisdom on how people are wired that comes in with your life coaching and
you do it in a business context, but so much of it works because it's just about inner wiring and relating to people. And so it works in homes and families and businesses. It just works. So,
well, and that's where they learn it first, right? Is at home. Right. And, you get, I love what you guys do and I celebrate what you guys do because that's the foundation place. I'm working with people that I wish some of that stuff would have been laid for them, that's going.
Right,
so
exactly.
guys totally cheerlead you guys along the way. So thank you for what you do.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next week for part 5 of Emotions. All right. Take care.